Welcome to the Find Your Best Future podcast. This is the podcast that helps international families make great decisions when it comes to choosing university courses.
Well, hello everybody and welcome along to our latest podcast. Today we are very fortunate to have Rob Finlayson from Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada join us. I won't say too much more, but I'll let Rob introduce himself and say a couple of words about his university.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Finlayson speaking to you all today from here in Canada's beautiful national capital city of Ottawa. Carleton's a comprehensive university. We offer a broad array of subjects at both the undergraduate and the postgraduate level, and we have close to 5,000 international students. I look forward to telling you more.
Now, Rob, can you just describe the physical location and the geographical location of your university and, of course, the transport connections? It's important that the international students understand how to get to Ottawa.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're based here in Canada's national capital city, which is Ottawa. Ottawa is located within the province of Ontario, but at the same time, right on the border with the province of Quebec. So I'm able to get to my hometown of Montreal in just over an hour by car. Toronto is the largest Canadian city, I should say. It's about a 4.5-hour drive from Ottawa. And we're just north of the U.S. border. Just south of us in the States, you'll find major cities like Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York City. Carleton's campus itself is situated in the city center, so it's a really big, beautiful park-like space, campus-based university. But at the same time, we benefit from being based in the central part of Ottawa. Very resource-rich location, very accessible for our students. In terms of getting to Ottawa from overseas, we are served by some international connections with both Frankfurt and Heathrow in London, UK. And of course, all locations, many locations across North America itself, United States and Canada. So you can fly directly to Ottawa through Europe or potentially via Pearson Airport in Toronto or Trudeau Airport in Montreal.
So very easy to get to. Students who are thinking about traveling to Canada, I mean, people have an idea that Canada is very cold. Could you actually tell them what the weather is like in Ottawa?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're blessed with 4 distinct seasons here. So I would say you're right. People have a perception of a very cold, wintry place, but that's not the case all the time. So summers here are quite hot. We have beautiful sunny weather, 30, 35 degrees Celsius. It can actually get quite warm with humidity. Here in our city, we're lucky because it's very easy to get outside of the city to take advantage of some really beautiful lakes and beaches. So it's nice to be able to enjoy the weather at that time of the year. Autumn is my personal favorite. It's usually when you get those really nice colors in the trees. Well, there's a little more crisp, but it's very comfortable, very beautiful place to be between September and December. Winter arrives sometime in the next few weeks and typically stays until March. And of course, we do have good wintry weather, so snow, and our campus itself is bordered by the Rideau Canal, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and the world's largest skating rink in the wintertime. You can get to downhill ski slopes for snowboarding and skiing in about 30 minutes from Ottawa. So it's quite fun in the winter. But if it's a cold day and you live on campus, you can actually use our underground tunnel network, so you don't even have to go outside. So weather's constantly changing. Spring is beautiful. After winter, people go a little crazy. We have a big flower festival every year. So yeah, distinctly different seasons.
I remember visiting Carleton a few years ago and being very impressed by your network of tunnels connecting the buildings. And I was there in the summertime. I remember thinking, it must get really cold here. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered to build these tunnels. But it's a lovely campus, Carleton. And I remember the canal very clearly. I guess the students go ice skating on the canal in the winter months. But who actually owns your university? Is it a government-funded university or is it a private university?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the majority of Canada's universities, including Carleton, are public institutions. So we are a public university.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about the facilities your university offers? The teaching facilities, libraries, sports, art performance, all those sort of things.
Yeah, the cool thing about Carleton really is I could describe it to you as like a city within the city. So on campus, we have everything students really need at their fingertips. So residence, so living on campus, which is guaranteed for students applying to us directly out of high school, private rooms, shared rooms, apartment style residences, so lots of diversity there. We have more than 300 student societies, some amazing sports facilities, including an Olympic-sized swimming pool, indoor and outdoor tennis courts, 2 skating rinks. We have our own campus radio station and newspaper, and of course, resources for teaching. So obviously, amazing library, but depending upon what you study, for journalism students, there's a studio on campus for producing news, state-of-the-art resources for engineering students, some of which are unique to Carleton, but all of which are further supported by being in Ottawa, where there's a huge concentration of life and health science research institutes as well. So I would describe it as a resource-rich campus. Lots of things you could take advantage of. Learning by doing, I guess you would say, really would be a hallmark of a Carleton degree.
Sounds very enticing. Approximately how many undergraduate students do you have at Carleton?
Yeah, so offering both UG and PG programs, so you can do a bachelor's, master's, or PhD program. But the majority of our students are undergraduate students, and I would say approximately 17,000 students, about 32,000 students in total at Carleton, to put that in context.
Yes, so with that number of students, you obviously have quite a range of very attractive facilities on offer. And now I know that some universities have a main campus and perhaps another campus somewhere else, maybe even in a different city. Does Carleton fall into this category, or are you just located on the one campus?
Yeah, all of our resources are situated here on the campus. There is one exception, and that is for our music degree. We do have a performing arts space in the more central part of the city as well. So for students that do get involved in the music program, there is a performance space for them as well.
Now, in terms of your team of staff, your lecturers and professors, are they mainly Canadian, or are they drawn from many different parts of the world?
Yeah, I would say the teaching is comprised of the same mix as we see in our student body as well, which is to say very diverse. So we attract talent from all over the world for professors.
And in terms of your student body, roughly what proportion come from outside Canada?
It's about 17%, or approximately 5,000 international students across the undergraduate programs. I'll add actually one small point. We're quite proud of the fact that it's a very diverse international mix too. So we don't have a ton of students from only 1 or 2 countries, over 150 different nationalities across our international student community. So students from the United States and Mexico, throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and of course across Canada as well.
That's quite a remarkable number of different nationalities that you have. I wasn't even sure how many different countries or nationalities there are in the world, but I guess it's probably, I don't know, approaching 200 maybe. I'm sure the United Nations has the answer to that question. But does your university have sort of relationships with other universities? So I'm thinking in terms of students' opportunities to go on exchange programs.
Yeah, we partner with 130 institutions around the world. I think you're representing about 35 different countries. So you're right, this would allow students to seamlessly take courses at partner institutions and have those credits applied towards their Carleton degree.
A very attractive proposition for potential students, I think. Now, I have to ask you this, rankings. Parents are always in my office talking about, is this university ranked, or what number is it, etc. Can you just briefly describe how Carleton is ranked? I know that in Canada you have Maclean's rankings, and then there's also QS World rankings. How does Carleton fare on the rankings?
Yeah, it's true. This is a question that comes up a lot. I usually advise students that rankings can be really helpful if you really pay attention to the metrics that are being measured and you're looking for very specific outcomes. I would say Carleton does well in the rankings. You're right. The only formal ranking we have here in Canada is through the Maclean's magazine. That ranks Carleton overall 5th in its category of comprehensive institutions. When you look at the various international rankings, QS, Shanghai Times, US, we typically rank in the top 5% of the world's universities. And of course, some programs are standouts for this as well. I would highlight aerospace engineering, math, computer science, award-winning journalism program. And of course, the location lends itself really well for public affairs programs like global politics.
That's very impressive. Listeners, if you are interested in learning more about rankings, we've actually made an episode on this topic. So if you just scroll through and find the rankings episode. Can you give us a quick overview of the courses that your university offers and which courses are most popular with the international students?
Yeah, one of the nice things about Carleton is, especially for anybody listening today who might be undecided or not totally confident about what they want to study, lots of opportunities to explore different subjects once you arrive on campus. So here at Carleton, we have 22 fully different degree programs across 5 faculties, and within each degree, many different majors you can choose from. So faculty number 1 would be engineering and design. We actually have the second biggest engineering program in all of Canada. So we have 13 different full undergraduate choices like aerospace, biomedical, civil, electrical, mechanical, etc., as well as an architecture program and industrial design. So lots of choices there. We have a full business school at Carleton with 2 undergraduate business degrees. So the international business program allows students to actually acquire a brand new language while studying business. And they spend a whole year of the program at one of our partner institutions, perfecting their language skills and understanding business in an international context. And then, of course, the commerce degree offers 8 concentrations with different business subjects, so lots of diversity there. We have a number of social science programs, so Bachelor of Arts, criminology, law, sociology, oldest journalism school in Canada, so also communication studies, public affairs. I would highlight, of course, again, because of Ottawa's political nature, I think political science is quite well known here at Carleton, as well as global politics and international relations. And then lastly, science degrees. So we have a really good health sciences program. So if anybody's thinking about medicine, of course, in Canada, this is a postgraduate credential. Health sciences is a great pathway for professional medical programs or for research related to human health at the master's or PhD level. We also have a computer science program, information technology, mathematics. I would just say, again, many different majors across each of these degrees. And for those that aren't totally sure what you want to study, you can actually combine programs. You can do majors and minors. You can even be undeclared in your first year before deciding what you'd like to focus on in your second year. So still time to explore and figure these things out once you arrive.
My personal opinion is I think it's one of the big strengths of the Canadian university system is that students do have that flexibility. It's sometimes very hard for a high school student to know for sure what they want to major in. And of course, students grow and develop as people, as academic students as they go through the program. Can you just tell us, are your programs 3-year bachelor programs or 4-year?
Yeah, the majority of our degrees are 4-year degrees. So if you did an engineering degree, for example, or a commerce degree in business, those are all 4 years, no options to do a 3-year degree. But if you did do a Bachelor of Arts degree, for example, you could do a general degree, which is the 3 years. One piece of information I would share, though, is if you have any sort of thinking about maybe going on to grad school post completion of your undergraduate degree, you would need a 4-year degree in Canada to do that. So I would suggest applying for the 4-year honors program. And as you progress through the degree, if you sort of get a better understanding of what you want to do post-graduation, and it doesn't include grad school, you can always go down to the general degree at that time.
Thank you. That's a very useful tip, I think, for students who are thinking of going on to postgrad. Something else that I get asked a lot about is, can a student combine the academic program with a placement or internship, a co-op program during the course of their bachelor degree? I mean, how does Carleton approach this and what's on offer?
That's a great question. So I think increasingly students going into university are thinking, beyond those 4 years and what will my life look like once I finish and how will this degree help me maybe launch myself professionally? So it's a key question. I would say about 90% of Carleton's degrees do offer co-op basically professional paid internships. That's what co-op is. So you do have that option at Carleton. Students that do co-op placements typically complete 3 full work experiences at an organization directly related to their subject of study. So the benefit really is, well, there are a few benefits. First, I think, is by being able to work in different professional capacities, you have a much better understanding about what type of work you find interesting. So when you finish your degree, you're not starting from ground zero. You're like, oh, I really found this particular type of work more engaging, and I'm going to try to work in that particular field. But beyond that, of course, you have relevant recent work experience, and you have a network of contacts that you can leverage for job hunting. So, and you get paid, which is a nice way to help cover your costs. Beyond that, we do have internships too, which is a non-paid work experience. So, for example, our journalism students all do an internship as part of that program. And also our Bachelor of Global and International Studies students all complete an international experience in their third year as part of that degree. So some programs do have these different types of real world learning experiences built into them as well.
I know that one of my two sons actually did this as part of his degree, and he always says it was a fabulous experience, really taught him a lot. But in terms of organizing these co-op programs, do the students have to go out and look for these jobs, or does the university help them find these positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the co-op office does facilitate the opportunities. So when it's the student's time to go on a co-op term, all of the options are presented, and then they actually go through the process of applying for those positions. So we know that this is an opening. It's my top choice. So you interview for that. And I think students benefit by learning about interviewing, putting a resume together, like all of those aspects of job searching is kind of built into the process. That said, there are options or opportunities as well for students to create co-op work placements based on maybe family connections. So, for example, a student from a city in another country might have a family business or a connection in with a major company based in that city. And we'd be very happy to work with the organization directly to create a co-op opportunity for that student. It just has to meet certain parameters in terms of providing meaningful experiences that complement what they've already been learning in the classroom. And of course, that they're going to be treated fairly and everything, but those options exist as well. So I would say both options are there.
Do you find that many of your students sort of take up this option of going to do their co-op program outside Canada, or is it mainly sort of in Canada or in Ontario province even?
Yeah, it's both. I think certain subjects lend themselves to certain locations more. So you could say somebody that's doing our video game development program, for example, there's some great options here in Ottawa, but they also have options in cities like Vancouver and Toronto and even down in the States as well. And so from the student's perspective, you can kind of hone in on organizations that might appeal to you in terms of maybe future job prospects. So you could say, moving to another city for 4 months or 8 months is worthwhile because this is really going to benefit me post-graduation. But I've also spoken to students that felt like moving was something they just didn't want to do. And there's so many options based here in the city of Ottawa as well that they choose to do all their co-op terms locally. So I guess it probably depends on the student and the subject of interest and where the options are.
Okay, can we move on now and talk a little bit about the teaching style at Carleton? It's a topic that a lot of high school students don't really give enough thought to. That's my feeling anyway. So at Carleton, is it more a problem-based learning style of teaching or more the traditional lecture-based learning?
Yeah, it's a cool question, actually. I think people, they don't necessarily consider this before they embark on their studies. But I would say you'll find a mix of learning experiences here, but overall, a huge focus on hands-on learning. So putting people in situations or contexts where they employ critical thinking skills to sort of solve real world problems. So this could be through group and project work or through co-op placements that we just discussed, or perhaps spending time overseas as part of the degree as well. There's a number of different experiences, I think, that draw upon theoretical knowledge that would have been taught in a lecture style kind of format, but applied then in this sort of like reactionary context where people are really put in a situation where they have to solve problems through different skills, I would say. So both.
So when a student is on a bachelor program at Carleton, how is that student going to be assessed? Are they assessed, on a continuous assessment basis, or is it just a big end exam?
Yeah, a bit of diversity there, I would say. So in some cases, there are exams with a lot of weight put on them, but often there's a number of different factors that are considered, including various projects, essays, possibly participation in discussions as well. So the type of feedback that you provide in different learning contexts as well. So many courses will probably employ a number of different assessment tools for the final grade.
Okay, so obviously before a student can actually start the course at Carleton, which is what we've been talking about here, they actually have to get a place. Now, when you go out to sort of recruit students, or you are looking at their applications, do you have some sort of idea about the attributes of a successful applicant? I mean, the profile of the ideal student. What sort of person do you feel would be a good fit for Carleton?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I would look at it in two ways. So, on the one hand, there's going to be the academic requirements. And so, generally speaking, we're looking for good grades as the primary assessment tool. So, external tests, for example, are usually not required for Carleton. Academic success from their program of study is, with prerequisites for specific programs, for example, math, physics, and chemistry for engineering program. There are a few exceptions. So again, for our music degree, there would be an audition. For industrial design, for architecture, for interactive multimedia program, there'll be a portfolio. And a lot of weight would be placed on the creative aspect of those portfolios. So I would say that's the admissions piece. But the secondary piece, and I think this is helpful for listeners looking at Canada, because I think the quality of Canada's universities is quite consistent. So choosing the right one for you kind of comes down to suitability. So what would make Carleton a great choice, I think, would be, generally speaking, Carleton students really like to engage. They get involved in the community. They participate. They challenge. If the university does something that they don't agree with, they'll tell us about that in an active way. So I think the type of person that does well here at Carleton is someone that likes to get involved in the community and really engage beyond just being in the classroom, I would say. So in terms of suitability, I would recommend that as maybe an entry point. I also would suggest, we'd love to host students. If anybody does think they're interested in Carleton and they're able to come to Canada, we'd be happy to host a great day for them. But if that's not possible, you could do virtual tours as well, which is a nice way to get a better understanding of the campus context, the buildings that we have, the resources we have to teach as well, for example.
In addition to sort of good grades or a good academic standard, are there any other requirements that students need to meet in order to be admitted?
Possibly, yeah. So being an English medium institution, we do require English language proficiency. So depending upon a student's background, if you're an IB student who's been studying at an IB school in English, generally speaking, 3 years in a school like that is more than sufficient to demonstrate English proficiency. But if English is your second language and you're not studying in English, then we usually ask for this as a requirement as well. So good grades and then being able to demonstrate the ability to study effectively at a post-secondary level in English.
Now, some of the listeners to this podcast episode are probably considering applying to Carleton. Can you think of maybe a former student whose story would serve as an inspiration to these potential applicants out there?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to look at the journey from like deciding which university to go to what you do after graduation, and along the way, all the things that some students contribute to. So I can think of many examples, but one individual that comes to mind, I remember we had a chance to meet while he was still a student in Lebanon. And we kept in touch closely afterwards, and he chose Carleton, which was great. He arrived on campus with his dad. I remember that very first day, how kind of nervous and excited they were at the same time. He really thrived here. So he was on the honor list, the president's honor list, for having extremely high grades. Every year for the full 4 years he was here, he was involved in different aspects of the campus, from sports teams to student governance to volunteerism. And now that he's graduated, we're connected on LinkedIn, and I can see he's actively involved as a leader in his profession. He's hosting events all the time and connecting with incoming young people into his business. So it's really interesting and cool to see that journey, I think, from high school student to professional.
I think it's a well-accepted fact that Carleton is a university that really sort of brings on obviously the academic potential of students, but also all the other sort of soft skills, transferable skills, and sort of encourages students to make the most of what they have. So, Rob, we've just been talking about the academics and the sort of student that you'd like to recruit, but something which I think is very, very important is the whole area of student support services, academic support, social emotional support, because these students are usually quite young when they leave their home country and they travel across half the globe probably to come to Canada. So how do you support these students?
Yeah, you're right. It's a huge decision, and deciding to get on a plane and leave home probably for the very first time, potentially to a place you've never been to before, it's a big, daunting choice. So the good news, I think, is that there's a lot of support provided to students from the point where we meet at a high school visit when they're just thinking about which universities to apply to attending a number of virtual events that we host between this time of the year and when students are actually here on campus as well. So just different important pieces of information at the right time. For example, we have a peer mentorship program for incoming students as well. So if you're interested in connecting with an upper year international student in a mentorship basis, then you can have a resource that you can speak to in real time. I'm starting to pack, or I'm a bit nervous, or whatever. They're able to help you with that. Immigration support pre-arrival as well. So the study permit to come to Canada, we can provide guidance and support with that important piece as well. After arriving in Canada, of course, the big academic orientation, social orientation, and all of that opportunities to engage and connect with all the students on campus, form new friendships, learn everything you need to know about the university and about the city as well. Again, the International Student Services Office provides key role in this piece in terms of connecting with other students, going shopping to get your dorm room all set up. What do you need for a Canadian winter? So, sort of really basic but helpful information at that stage. And then as students are here, I think we're really proud of the fact that we've created, really robust student support services. So everything somebody needs to do well exists. They just have to take advantage of it. So whether it's academic support, whether it's sitting down to talk to somebody about social and emotional issues, we have a health and counseling services, office here on campus. So you can see a doctor anytime you need to as well, just in terms of physical health. We believe Carleton to be one of the most accessible universities in the world. So through our Paul Menton Center for Students with Disabilities, we can provide a full gamut of support for people regardless of their circumstances as well. And then Student Experience Office. So whether you want to get involved in campus life through joining clubs and societies, if you want to be a volunteer here with the City of Ottawa, there's a number of nonprofit organizations that always require help as well. Student governance as well. Of course, athletics as well, varsity level sports. So there's tons people can take advantage of. And I think once they arrive and they're aware of these resources, the more they use them, the better they tend to do, I think. So yeah, there's certainly a lot.
Now, Canadian University, of course, offer a huge range of extracurricular activities in terms of, societies, clubs, hobbies, sports, etc. What are the most popular sports at Carleton?
Yeah, so we have a broad array that you could choose, but I would definitely be remiss if I didn't start with basketball, because we've been the top basketball school team in Canada for almost 20 years now. So we're really proud of that fact. Our men's Ravens basketball team is a very, very, very strong team. So anybody that's interested in that highly competitive level for basketball, Carleton should definitely be on your list. But we have a number of other sports. So, of course, soccer, American football, rugby, water polo, fencing, you name it. And then, of course, the varsity level is the highest level of competition, the Inter-University League. But from that, there's a whole array of options between this level of competition and, just recreational house league. So you can get involved in a number of different ways. And then I would say beyond that, what we have on campus, one thing we don't have is a cricket team, but for students from South Asia, for example, there is a cricket league in the city. So you could still maybe play your sport. If it's not here on campus, it's probably in the city as well.
I'm devastated, Rob, because cricket is actually my favourite sport, but never mind. I'll still come to Carleton, even despite the absence of a cricket team. When I posed the question about which is the most popular sports, I felt sure I knew what the answer was going to be, but you haven't mentioned it yet. What about hockey? I mean, Canada is world famous for hockey, and it wasn't on your list. Surely you must have a hockey team.
We do, yeah. We have both men's and women's varsity hockey.
I'm relieved to hear it. I can't imagine Canada without hockey. That's unthinkable. But apart from sports, I mean, you obviously have sort of artistic, sort of music, theatre, all those sort of creative societies on offer as well. Do you actually have like a theatre on the campus or some venue where these sort of events take place?
We do, yeah. So there's a very active theater group on campus that hosts productions every year. And then we have a performance-based music degree too. So if you're interested in playing music and being part of an academic program for that, there is a performance space here in the city for that program as well. And then there's a number of clubs and societies that are also sort of creatively focused, you could say. So whether you're interested in digital or old-fashioned analog photography, for example, to other things as well, there's really something for everybody.
Are there a lot of social events going on? Like, do the students go partying at the weekend? What's happening on campus?
Yeah, it's been really wonderful to see, COVID is still an issue, but certainly we're in a changing context. And so being back on campus and the city itself, coming back to life, there's a number of things people can do. Ottawa is an interesting city because it's a small city by world standards. You could say it's just over 1 million people. So a mid-sized North American city for sure. But it allows for all of the resources and infrastructure you might find in a larger city like Toronto. So vibrant nightlife, international sporting events and cultural events, great food scene here as well, live music, theater, etc. But at the same time, it's a very easy place to navigate and get around. Beyond Carleton, of course, there's two other universities here, plus 2 large colleges. So that means there's a huge number of students that come to Ottawa every year to learn. And that kind of also creates a really young dynamic to the city as well, just in terms of the feeling, I think. So for going out and having fun, there's a number of different things that people like to do to take advantage of that as well.
Let's talk a little bit about the alumni networks, because I know that students, perhaps if they don't realize it now while they're still in high school, they're going to come to value the whole sort of connections, alumni in supporting their careers after they finished at Carleton. Does Carleton have some sort of organized alumni network?
We do. Yeah, our alumni services group works with students as they graduate, and then as they go forth in their lives, there's a number of ways you can connect back with the university through alumni meetups in key cities around the world, and just getting updates from the university, for example, new buildings that are coming online, new opportunities, and notable alumni, what they've gone on to do as well afterwards. So I think one of the nice things about Carleton is that, as we sort of discussed earlier, it's a very international context. So you are able to make friends with people from all over the world. And then whether you choose to stay in Ottawa post-graduation, return to your home city, or go somewhere else, you are part of this international community of alumni as well. So you're connected in a way that goes well beyond your 4 years with us.
Now, regular listeners will probably have noticed that Neil normally asks the questions about accommodation and food being a big passion of his. But unfortunately, dear listeners, he's not able to make it this evening. I think he's away eating somewhere. So he's delegated this important task to me. Now, food is something dear to the hearts of university students. And of course, accommodation is as well. But I think probably it's more important that we start with the accommodation, and then we'll move on to the food questions. So first up, students always want to know, does the university provide accommodation or guaranteed accommodation for first-year students, or do you have a guaranteed accommodation for the entire span of the bachelor program? How is that organized at Carleton?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a key concern. I think as soon as you've decided on the university, the next step will be, where will I live when I get there? So the good news is, yes, we do have a number of different types of accommodation on campus for students, and it is guaranteed for all students applying to us directly out of high school, which means you can live on campus You can take advantage of different living contexts. So the traditional residence experience, of course, is a shared room. So that's an option if you're coming from a city and one of your good friends from that location is coming and you guys want a room together. We can easily put that together for you. But we do have apartment style residences and private residences as well. It is guaranteed for first year, but not beyond, but it is managed on a first come, first served basis. So I would say if you do want to live on campus, and one of my colleagues, Leah, is a former international student, and she chose to live on campus for her full 4 years. The secret is to just put your name in and apply once the list opens and you're at the top of the list. So being able to stay on campus is very much doable. Many people do like to do that as well.
So if a student decides to move off campus at the end of the first year, and presumably they will go out into the city and rent an apartment, does the university help them look for apartments? You have like a housing office with a list of available apartments or accommodation?
We do. So our housing office is there to serve as a resource for students, really. So they provide guidance in terms of how one would go about finding accommodation, neighborhoods that are close to the university, for example, what your rights are as a tenant here in the province of Ontario, so things that you should be aware of as a new renter, for example. And they also have a listserv where you can find accommodation as well. So whether that's a family with a home off campus with like an apartment built into the house that they're renting to students, to potentially a group of students that have a house already and they have space for one more, to apartments that you would rent independently or with a friend. So they do have a number of different types of options, and they can provide guidance in terms of helping to find those locations as well.
Now, some parents are concerned about sort of gender separation in the housing. Do you actually have specific housing blocks which are just for male or just for female students?
We do. I think overall with like living, you really want to be comfortable. And so we definitely want to put people in contexts where they are going to feel comfortable. So there's a number of different living scenarios that meet different needs and requirements, from co-ed dorms to gender segregated dorms. Even within dorms itself, you could find this is a social floor versus a more quiet floor, themed communities sometimes. So certain programs have their own space within residence as well. So students in the humanities degree, for example, are able to kind of be in a cluster together. So yeah, overall, we do try to create community. And it is, in a way, student-led. So if you do want to live on campus and you are going to be in a traditional residence room, there's a series of questions you would answer that would match you to somebody that's going to be, suitable in terms of living arrangement. So again, like a really quiet person might not be a good match for a very social person that's always got friends coming in and out of the room, for example. So yeah, we do our best to create those dynamics effectively.
How much does accommodation cost then on campus, approximately? I'm sure it varies from one style of accommodation to another, but if you could give us some sort of ballpark figure idea of what it would cost.
Yeah, you're right. There is a bit of a range, but generally speaking, I would say $10,000 to $12,000 Canadian.
And that's for a full year. Is it for full 12 months?
That would be for 8 months. So the school year will typically run from September to December, January until April. We do have a summer term, and some students will study for the full 3 terms, but a lot of students like to take the summer for potentially going home, for traveling, or for working full time, or maybe for co-op when the time comes for that as well.
Now, in terms of the facilities in these sort of housing blocks that you have on campus, are students able to sort of cook their own food? Do you have kitchens there available for the students to use?
There are facilities they can take advantage of. They don't have full kitchens per se, but hot plates and you can make and warm small, simple snacks. But generally speaking, it is provided through our student dining facility. There's a number of different dining facilities across the campus as well.
So the students are not going to starve then?
No, definitely not.
Okay. Another question really is about the range of food, because many people nowadays have specific dietary needs. Perhaps they're vegetarians or vegans, or perhaps they have faith-based food restrictions. How do you accommodate the needs of these students?
Yeah, that's also an important question. Food, as you said before, it's such an important part of how we experience the world and socialize and come together as a community. And Carleton has students from all over the world with many different, personal contexts as well. So our student dining facility is able to meet and provide support for many, many different dietary considerations. So whether you're looking for halal or kosher options, whether you're vegan or you're looking for gluten-free, we have all different options to meet those needs. So that's something. The other thing that we do that I think is quite interesting to talk about is a lot of the food is sourced locally and of course prepared fresh on demand. So we don't work with a company that, prepares food off site and it's brought here and warmed up when you want it. It's actually cooked and prepared for you when you order it. So
I'm sitting here thinking, actually, it's sort of heading on towards 7 o'clock in the evening here in Vienna, where I'm sitting, and I haven't had my dinner yet. So maybe we shouldn't talk too much about food here. But before we get off the topic of food, I mean, a lot of countries have for want of a better phrase, a national dish. Now, it might be interesting for foreigners, non-Canadians coming to Canada to sample Canada's national dish. But what actually is Canada's national dish, or is there one?
Yeah, that's a provocative question. There's so many.
It is, isn't it? Yes.
One thing that I think Canada is interesting in that, so Canada is a huge country, right? I mean, physically speaking, it's the second biggest landmass in the world for a country, lots of space. But population-wise, there's only about 37 million Canadians. So if you compare that to like a city like, I don't know, Delhi, for example, or Cairo, half of Canada would be in just one city. So it's not a huge population, but it's a very multicultural one. So Canadians really are from all over the world and they're proud of being Canadian, but they're also proud of their, home cultures, and they bring all of these different culinary traditions here. So I think in one sense, you could say Canadian food really is encompassing many different world foods and cuisines, and you'll easily find that here in the city and on campus as well. But there are a few local treats, I think, that people like to try when they come. One, we mentioned the Rideau Canal, and every year when that turns into the world's largest skating rink, you can get a beaver tail, which is like a local pastry with different flavors. It's really nice. It's kind of like a flat donut, but people like to try that as well. Poutine is famous, I think, chips, cheese curds, and gravy from Quebec. This is quite popular as well. And then you'll find more traditional foods, maybe like, from Montreal, maybe a nice tourtière, French Canadian meat pie, pea soup, things like this are quite nice as well.
I remember on my most recent trip to Canada, I was traveling with a group of college counselors, most of whom were Canadians. And we started off in Montreal and we traveled all the way down to Toronto. Obviously, this is how I got to visit Carleton on the way. But one of my colleagues, when we were still in Montreal, he introduced me to poutine. And this is a sort of dish. And I looked at it, I thought, when the weather is minus 20, this is something I would definitely want to eat. Unfortunately, on that particular day, I think it was about plus 28 and quite humid. So I just went for a salad or something a little lighter. But if you're going to go to Canada, it's definitely worth trying. One last question. We're talking really about students are on campus during the day. They have basically a working day, so they need to get some lunch. I mean, how much would a student actually have to spend if they just wanted to go to the cafeteria or canteen for a lunch?
Yeah, great question. I think you can get like soup and a sandwich for $8 Canadian. So a decent lunch for around $10, I guess, if you have something to drink with that as well.
Yeah. Perhaps those of you not familiar with the value of a Canadian dollar, it's actually less than the US dollar. So what would $10 Canadian be about? What, $7 US? Or
yeah,
something like
somewhere between $7 and $8. I guess these days trending towards $7.
Now, we've talked about the important matters of the facilities, the academic program that the university offers, and of course things like accommodation and food. But now we come on to a crucial matter, the matter of money. Now, tuition fees in Canada, I believe, vary depending on whether you're a Canadian citizen or international citizen. Perhaps you could talk about this topic a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. So Like I say, Carleton's a public university, and indeed, the majority of Canada's universities are public institutions. So there's only about 100 odd universities across the whole country, and the vast majority of those are public institutions, which means that Canadian citizens or permanent residents of Canada pay a lower cost. Ostensibly, the government rebates the cost for students with that citizenship status. So depending upon, and you're right, it does vary by province as well, because universities are managed at the provincial level. So you might find different price points in Ontario versus Newfoundland versus British Columbia, for example.
So approximately how much would an international student have to pay per year to study at Carleton?
Yeah, our international student fees would vary by program. So I would say you're looking at between $30,000 and $38,000, depending upon the degree. Generally speaking, less expensive degrees would be ones without lab fees. So a Bachelor of Arts degree in history would be less expensive than an engineering degree, for example. So the range would reflect that.
And how much would Canadian citizens pay?
You're looking at about $12,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
12 to 15.
Obviously, tuition fees are an important part of the calculation that parents and families have to make when they're considering sending their son or daughter away to university. And the other important part, of course, is accommodation, which we've just touched on in terms of housing. But students also need a bit of spending money. So roughly how much do you think a student needs for spending money per month?
Per month, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if you're going to have a mobile phone and you're going to go out on the weekends, one thing I would mention actually is international students do have the ability to work part-time here in Canada on or off campus, which is a really normal thing for a Canadian university student to do as well. So equally accessible for international students. So just in terms of the pocket money piece, that's something that could maybe help support with that. I would say if you were looking at budgeting for the whole year, for example, maybe if you budgeted something like $3,000 to $5,000 for those types of expenses, and then obviously the more you go out and the more you spend, that could be a higher amount, basically.
Yes. You mentioned the fact that non-Canadians can work in Canada while they're there on a study permit or student visa. Can they actually stay on in Canada after they've graduated? Because I think this is quite an attractive option for international students coming to Canada. Is that allowed?
Yeah, it is. So when you're approaching graduation, you can meet with our International Student Services Office for support with this, but students are able to apply for the postgraduate work permit, which allows international students to stay in Canada after they've finished their degree for up to 3 years for professional work purposes. So for those, for example, that maybe took advantage of the co-op work placements and they have a whole network of previous employers that they could potentially reach out to, being able to work for one of those organizations in a full-time way as a new graduate and then stay back in Canada during that time is certainly something a lot of international students like to take advantage of.
In terms of sort of financing the studies at Carleton or at a Canadian university, how much financial aid is actually available to international students, and how is it organized?
For sure. That's a really key piece, I think, too, for a lot of families. The most accessible scholarship we offer is the entrance scholarship. This doesn't require a separate application. So by virtue of applying to Carleton for a bachelor's degree, you're automatically already assessed for this at the same time as being assessed for admission. So depending upon your GPA or your predicted IB points, we will offer you one of these scholarships. They start at $4,000 and then they increase to $8,000 to $12,000 and up to $16,000, depending again on grades. But it's allocated across the 4 years of the degree. So for example, the highest entrance scholarship would be a $4,000 annual award across the 4 years of the degree. We also offer something that I think is unique to Carleton, and that is many universities will offer entrance scholarships, but you have to retain a certain GPA to continue to receive the scholarship. And if you've lost the scholarship at any point, it's lost forever. We have the requirement of keeping up an A- GPA to get the scholarship in year 2, 3, and 4, but it's a regainable award. So if you do lose the scholarship, but your grades return to that level, then it would be reinstated. So this is something that's interesting. We also have we have competitive scholarships that people can apply for as well. So unlike the entrance award, you do submit a separate application for the Prestige Scholarship Program. These are all valued at a higher amount than the entrance awards, but they are competitive, with the students that win, generally speaking, having a background that includes good academics, obviously, but also a resume of diverse sort of leadership engagement. So maybe they were involved in students' council at their secondary school. Perhaps they played sports, or maybe they're a musician. Maybe they do volunteer work. Sort of all of those opportunities together kind of make a competitive application. And then finally, we do offer bursaries as well, which isn't available for new students. But once you've become a Carleton student in your second and third and fourth year, you can actually apply for a bursary, which is just a gift of money based on personal family finances. So that's something that people can take advantage of as well.
Now, the next issue or next topic is a very important one, because non-Canadians will need to have a visa or study permit to go to Canada and to study there. Perhaps you could talk us through the process of getting one of these study permits for an international student.
Yeah, no problem. So you're right. After you're admitted to the university, the next step, well, thinking about where you might live, of course, but beyond that is also, how can I legally enter Canada as a non-Canadian? So the answer is through a study permit, which is basically the visa that allows you to come for 4 years to complete your studies. When you're admitted to Carleton, you'll receive an offer package, which includes a number of documents, one of which is the study permit support letter. So that letter has all of the key details needed to apply for the study permit. The good news is the Canadian study permit process is fairly straightforward. So it's not an onerous, set of activities. It should be something you can manage very easily. I would direct students to their local Canadian diplomatic mission, so a high commission or an embassy. The website will list very clearly the required documentation and the process you need to follow locally. While it's not a difficult process, it can be a time-consuming process. And so from that perspective, I certainly encourage students to apply well in advance of September, so they have enough time to complete that whole process. Applying early, which you can do with the conditional offer, I should add as well. You don't have to wait for a final offer. So just make sure to build in that time.
Does a student actually have to physically go to a Canadian embassy or diplomatic mission, or can they just do this online?
Yeah, for most locations, you can do this online. So it's not something that you have to travel. You shouldn't have to travel for it.
And would the student have to do it online through the local Canadian embassy of that country, or would they perhaps do it directly with the Canadian authorities in Ottawa, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. So generally speaking, it's not managed through the diplomatic mission. So the detailed information about the steps would be listed there, but usually it's through a provider that provides support to the Canadian government. So they'll have an online portal that you can submit your information through to. It's processed by Canadian government officials, but the whole process itself is administered externally.
Mm-hmm. And does a student have to provide evidence of English language proficiency?
They may, yeah. So this depends. So the university itself, we have our own requirements for English language proficiency. So as referenced earlier, either through numbers of years of study in an English medium school, or if English is your first language, certain countries, of course, have English as a first language, or through a test. Even though we may not require a test, though, you may be asked to supply this as part of the visa process as well.
Now, students, of course, are going to be researching many, many different universities, probably across multiple countries, and there'll be differences in content. What would you say are the strengths of Carleton University? If you imagine I'm a sort of a potential student, what would you say to me that are actually Carleton's strengths? Why should I come to Carleton rather than somewhere else?
Yeah, I love that question. So I would say Carleton, we have a number of interesting programs, I think some of which are really unique to this university. So first and foremost, the program itself should be a guiding sort of light. So like I say, being based in the capital city, a lot of our programs are geared towards the political nature of this particular location. So public affairs, global politics, international relations, law, economics, these can all be studied at the undergraduate level. And you can engage with resources that are key to that particular subject that are based right here in the city as well. So proximity, I think, is excellent to be able to engage in a really close and immediate way for firsthand research and to get experience with these organizations. So government agencies, parliament itself, high commission and embassies, etc. I would also, I guess, go back and reference the engineering school here is really big and quite prestigious. So we have, I believe, the oldest aerospace program in the country. So certainly a flagship program for our engineering department as well. But overall, beyond sort of the programming strengths, I would say, the beautiful campus and the type of community we've created here really fosters this critical thinking and engagement piece. So students at Carleton are very active in the classroom, but they're very active outside of the classroom as well. So with more than 300 student societies ranging from professional student governance organizations. So being the president of like the Commerce Student Society or the South Asian Students Community, for example, where you learn, like, I would say, really valuable leadership skills that you can stack with your education as well. So beyond, working towards completing a degree, you're also going to have all of these soft skills that you've acquired through getting involved in student clubs and communities, through engaging with the wider community as a whole. And you can document all of that on a co-curricular record as well. So I guess I would say in the end, you'll have a holistic experience, whether it's both in or outside of the classroom, and being based in a really beautiful, dynamic city that you can enjoy, but that you can also actively engage and learn from as well, really gives Carleton an advantage, I would say.
I mean, I'm very pleased to hear you talk about fostering these soft skills, because I think a lot of students before they go to university see it in the sense that they do an academic program, and then of course they have clubs and societies that they belong to or are participating in. But I think that there's a great deal of overlap, because as you rightly say, if you're the treasurer or president of a club or society, you are actually going to acquire a lot of skills which you can then transfer on to your profession after university, and will make you a more attractive candidate when you're competing in the job market. And I know that Carleton does an excellent job in this respect. Parents are always asking me about where do the graduates go on to work. I know a lot of universities publish this information on their websites, but what are the sort of typical career areas that your graduates move into?
Yeah, so a bit of a small brag here, but Carleton usually ranks, consistently over the last 10 years in the top 10 in Canada for graduate employability. So Carleton graduates find work, meaningful work related to their degree program within the first year, 90% plus of our graduates, that is. So they go on to work in many different areas. So whether they work in governance for the Canadian government or their home country's government, perhaps, or in diplomacy, for major organizations in commerce, I would highlight one of our big success stories locally is Shopify. The big e-commerce platform is headquartered here. We have a number of Carleton graduates that work at Shopify and in IT as a whole, big nonprofit sector, as well as diplomacy and governance. So really, because we offer that broad array of subjects, people go forth into politics, commerce, the arts, major industry and organizations all over the world.
Okay, Rob, I'm convinced you've talked me into it. I want to come to Carleton. So how do I maximize my chances of being accepted? And perhaps you can also describe what the application process is.
Yeah, a great question. So there's two ways you can apply to Carleton. One is the direct application, just carleton.ca. You can apply as an international student. Very straightforward process. You can apply up to 2 programs at a time through that particular channel. If, however, you are looking at the province of Ontario primarily, so you've decided to apply to Canadian universities, and you've really narrowed in on this particular region of the country, you can use our Ontario University Application Center, or the OUAC, as a type of Common App, if you will, but just for Ontario. So we have a number of universities here. You could apply, for example, to Carleton, the University of Ottawa, and the University of Toronto on a single application through the Ontario University Application Centre. So that certainly could be helpful if you are looking at just Ontario. If you wanted to apply to Carleton and the University of Alberta in the province of Alberta, applying to us directly through our website is less expensive than the OUAC. So that would be maybe one reason why you might choose the direct app versus the Ontario University Application Centre. After you apply, regardless of the channel, you'll receive an acknowledgement package where we invite you to create a Carleton 360 portal where you'll be able to upload documents directly to our portal, your academic documents, your English proficiency tests, and whatever else might be required. We do operate on a rolling admissions basis, which means once the application opens, we start to receive applications and we start to assess and admit students based on preliminary results, which means if you're an IB student and you have your predicted grades, or if you're a CBSE student in India with your 10th standard board exam results and maybe your midterm year 12 results, if you're in a US high school, if you're in a national curriculum school, but you haven't graduated, we can still admit you based on your results to date. So that means ostensibly we see a good student, we see good grades, and we see a really high likelihood of continued success. So with a conditional offer, you have a spot in the program. You can apply for the Canadian study permit. You can get the scholarship and the residence package all settled. All you need to do is send your final grades once those are available. And we're really well familiar with when different curriculum have final results. So, for example, if you're going to have your A-level results and they won't be available really until August, that's clearly too late to admit you. So we would be making decisions for you based on your predicted A-levels or your AS levels plus your IGCSEs, for example. So conditional admissions begin in December. We'll do that all the way through to your final grades.
What happens if a student's final grades sort of fall away and end up being lower than their predicted grades? Do they still have a place at Carleton, or do you review that?
We definitely review that. So we will look at the final grades, and grades are allowed to fluctuate. So if your grades have gone up a little bit, that's great. If they've gone down a little bit too, that's most likely fine. If you have gone down a substantial amount, or if for whatever reason you failed to successfully graduate, then we would need to reevaluate. Very few students find themselves in this situation. If and when that did happen, we would always look to provide a good alternate option. So this could mean, okay, you had an offer of admission to a program with a really high cutoff and you don't meet that anymore, but you still qualify. You might be offered an alternate program which you could then begin, and provided you do well academically, potentially transfer back into that original program in second year. If you have lost, an important prerequisite, we might be able to offer you another degree as well. So I guess all this to say, we would do our best to offer the students something as a pathway forward. And as I say, very few students find themselves in that position.
When would you recommend students start applying to Carleton? I mean, what are your sort of cut-off deadlines?
The application opened in September. You can apply anytime going forward from September onwards. The official deadline for the majority of our programs is going to be April 1st. Many programs, will be at capacity by that time. So applying early gives you a better chance of being admitted to high-profile programs and more time for the study permit. Be mindful that there are a few exceptions. So if you're looking at any of the portfolio programs like architecture and industrial design, typically there's an earlier application deadline for that. Could be March 1st. So
I suppose the message is that students should check the deadlines very carefully just in case, because students sometimes unfortunately miss the deadlines or only notice a program after the deadline has passed. So if you are listening to this and you're a high school student, it's really worthwhile sort of starting early and making a note of the application deadlines for the programs or the universities you intend to apply to. Just one last question on this sort of whole application process. In some parts of the world, working through an agent is commonplace. Will it improve a student's chance of acceptance if they work through an agent as opposed to just working through their school?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. We will accept all students based on their academics and academics alone. For sure, in certain contexts, people might be looking for local support that's available to them in a very immediate way, and that's certainly their right. But we don't prefer any sort of mechanism over the other. It's going to really be based on the grades primarily. And I note that Carleton's admissions team is available to help anytime. So you're welcome to email me directly. We also have a chat feature through our international admissions website, and you can book appointments with admissions officers as well. So any sort of support you might be looking for, we could definitely provide to you directly.
Rob, you've given us a lot of very, very valuable information, insight into Carleton. Is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't covered?
Yeah, we look forward to meeting you. If you're a student that's listening to this and you want more information about Carleton, we do host a number of events virtually. We just had our big international open house last weekend. We'll continue to offer virtual engagement between now and next September. But we also travel overseas. So we visit schools in all regions of the world throughout the year. So you never know, we might be visiting your city at some point between now and next September. I invite you to follow up to learn more about that. And of course, we're available to answer questions by email anytime. Like I say, Canada's got excellent universities. It really is about finding the right fit for you in terms of your interests, the campus culture, the unique opportunities provided at each of the universities. Carleton might be a great fit for you, and we certainly invite you to explore that and learn more.
On the topic of traveling overseas, Rob, it's been a while since you've come to visit me here in Vienna, so please remember you have an open invitation to come to my school in Vienna anytime.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, it's, as you know, it's a pretty nice place to be. So finally, we always encourage students to have a plan B. Is there any other university that you would recommend in case the students don't actually get in?
Yeah, so there's so many great options. I guess it would depend on the program. So, I mean, if you're looking at architecture schools, there aren't a huge number to choose from. I would say apply to Carleton, apply to Toronto Metropolitan University, Waterloo, McGill. We all have great programs. And because they're all very competitive, I would encourage people to apply to at least 3 of them. We are a great university for engineering. There's certainly other universities that have good engineering programs as well. Look at different options, different types of specializations as well. I think that's where we differ. It's the same accreditation no matter what, but we have different flavors and different ways of offering it. I would say, again, for politics, I don't think we could really be beat, but there's certainly some great options, across Canada. University of Toronto's got a great program, of course, as well. Do your research, do campus tours, and I'm sure you'll find some great options.
Rob, thank you so much. You provided us with a lot of food for thought and a very positive picture of Carleton and Canadian higher education generally. So you have been listening to Rob Finlayson from Carleton University in the city of Ottawa, Canada. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and share the Find Your Best Future podcast.